Today, we have Prashanth Aluru, the man building India's most ambitious fashion empire, Tomorrow.
Today, we are literally 3 years old and we are at a scale of $150 million.
Tomorrow is a digital-first house of brands backed by Aditya Birla Group.
We have brands which are 65% repeat, which is quite hard to pull off in the D2C world.
They own brands like Bewakoof, Nobero, and even Virat Kohli's brand WROGN.
Virat, as a celebrity, also owns equity in the company. And
In this episode, we break down how Tomorrow is building a multi-million dollar house of brands.
You would probably have to spend 25-30% of the order value in the first time acquisition of that customer.
To serve the next generation of consumers in India.
What was the biggest mistake you made in the first 12 months of building Tomorrow?
if you're not seeing signs of repeat, that definitely means you don't have product market fit.
And what it really takes to build a successful fashion brand from the ground up.
In 2025, if somebody had to build a 100 crore fashion brand, what is one hack, one advice that you would give them?
Welcome to Starting From Scratch.
Prashanth, welcome to Starting From Scratch. Very, very, very excited to have you here and learn from you today. As somebody who has been a VC before, if you had to pitch Tomorrow to me in 60 seconds, what's your pitch?
So if you had the opportunity to be part of a multi-billion dollar brand building exercise with the top 10 brands that solve for young India, would you be excited, right? Really owning leadership brands that solve for the younger India, Gen Zs and millennials. Folks who are not only brand using more brands, but also are starting to premiumize in their both wallet spend and wardrobe spend. And if you want to be part of that, this is the number one player in digital first fashion for the young India.
When it comes to career, you've had a stellar one. You've worked across Facebook, across Bain. I'm just name dropping here, but I can see Avatar AI, which is a Sequoia-backed startup. And then you moved on to the VC world and worked with somebody like a Kalari as well. How and why the decision to build Tomorrow?
Oh, great question. So I think if I look at my last 10 to 12 years, I had the privilege of looking at not just India internet, but India e-commerce from different lenses. The first lens I would say was back at Bain when I launched the digital practice along with a couple of other partners, early days of, again, e-commerce in India. And that was when we started to see the breakout possibility from players like Flipkart and others. And also global funds investing into India, which Bain was involved with.
Right.
The second lens was actually as a VC, right, at Kalari. And at Kalari, we'd seen the transition from horizontal e-commerce with Snapdeal to vertical e-commerce with Myntra. And the third lens was at Meta, at Facebook. Across Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, we could see a plethora of brands which are born on Instagram starting to disrupt traditional Indian brands or also global brands that had entered India, right? That again was early signs to see that, look, the power of brand building beyond the platforms like Myntra and Flipkart and Amazon. Now, with all of this coming together, I think the way Tomorrow happened was almost serendipity. I met Ashish, who's the MD of Aditya Birla Fashion, and Aryaman Birla, who's Mr. Birla's son and the next gen entrepreneur in the group. We sort of met through some common acquaintances. And today we are literally 3 years old and we are at a scale of $150 million, having built it from scratch. And even the founding team that I put together was something I had to build from scratch. And our first brand came in, I would say, August of 2022. We had Bewakoof and Nobero as the first couple of brands that came in.
I'm very curious, how did the wrong deal happen? And was it harder to acquire because it was a celebrity-led brand?
Well, whether it's a wrong deal or a right deal, I don't know. But yeah, I think, we've known the wrong founders actually for many years. I think they've been quite close, not just to our ecosystem, but personally, we had a relationship with them. And I think this was one of not just a celebrity-led brand, but also a brand which was funded by a marquee VC like Axel. Both Axel in India and Axel US were part of the cap table. Yes, it was a more complex deal because there were more stakeholders to convince, not just the founders who we knew well, but also Axel as a fund, other investors who, had to see the merit in, getting into this kind of a structure. Equally, Virat as a celebrity also owns equity in the company, and hence, I think him and his partners were also key stakeholders.
What was the biggest mistake you made in the first 12 months of building Tomorrow?
Like most founders, you end up obsessing way too much about other players that have already started before you, right? And at that point, like I said, the central theme was the Thrasio model coming to India, a couple of unicorns being built in literally less than 12 months, right? Coming out of the froth of 2021. So we ended up actually spending more time than we needed to in trying to understand all of those players and getting obsessed about them being 1 to 2 years ahead of us. And luckily, in 3-4 months, we realized that model was not for us, and hence we chose a very different path, which is, like I said, a brand builder path. For example, one of the things I thought about differently to the earlier discussion on founder-led is I said, look, idea is not to acquire and get the brand founders out too soon. We need them for the next phase of the journey. Whereas the US model, which came to India, was largely to try and buy out 100% as quickly as you can and assume that you can necessarily do it all by yourself, right?
How much do you obsess about competition? Like, what's the right level? Where do I put the slider?
Yes, I think even as we went through the categories we chose to play in fashion, right? In every single category, we knew who were the number 1, number 2, number 3 brands were if the category was established. If it is a category creation path, then there's obviously no example to go by. But in all the large categories we're playing in, we know the other good brands, right? In the Bewakoof space, it's Soul Store, right, and which is elevation funded. Similarly, in the TIGC space, it's Niche, right? In the Nobero space, it's a category creator, so we don't think there is any. But there are marketplace brands which have been built, or even brands like HRX, which fall in a similar zone, right? In the WROGN space, it actually competes with the larger national brands like US Polo, to international brands like Jack & Jones, to new age brands like Snitch, right? So I think that's a set of brands there. And all of these are well-respected brands in our mind. It's not just because they're not part of tomorrow, it doesn't mean we have nothing to learn from them. So I think that's how we look at competition.
What's your CAC range across your portfolio of brands? And is it different drastically across the brands? And what are you doing to reduce it? That's the follow-up question.
Yeah, I think the CACs obviously vary based on, we have 2 kinds of brands in our portfolio. One which are focused on Gen Z, and one set which is focused on millennials. And the price laddering goes anywhere from all the way from 500, 750 rupees all the way to 2,000 rupees, right? And that's where bulk of the digital first e-commerce market is today, right? So based on the average order value and the ASP of the brand, of course, the CAC would vary. And typical thumb rule would be, you would probably have to spend 25-30% of the order value in the first time acquisition of that customer. But the way we look at CAC is largely to go back to the previous answer. If your repeats are starting to trend in the right direction, right? And you start to get to the right levels of repeats quite quickly in the first 12 months of the journey itself, then the blended CAC is what matters, right? As long as the new customer CAC is X and the repeats are moving from 10% to 40% to, we have brands which are 65% repeat, which is quite hard to pull off in the D2C world, right? So as you get to 40 to 65% repeat levels, then the repeat transaction will be anywhere between 80 to $100 for repeat orders. Whereas the first CAC could be, the new customer CAC could be anywhere between 250 rupees to 500, 600 rupees, right? But our CACs are typically in the 250 to 400 when it comes to new customer acquisition. And blended, they would be in the 200 to 450 zone, right? So that's broadly how we look at it.
How do I reduce my CAC? Do you have a go-to answer?
That's a holy grail question that has no answers. Sometimes more funding is the only answer, but yeah, I think jokes aside, to me, I think it boils down to the repeat loyalty. If you're not seeing signs of repeat, that definitely means you don't have product market fit, right? So you should just go back to the drawing board rather than keep acquiring more customers on the back of a weak product market fit, and literally go back and see why is it that you're not seeing repeat, right? It's very, very easy to fall in the temptation of buying bad growth by constantly acquiring new customers when the structural unit economics are not there. And we've had that in our own journey where despite how much you try, right, it may take another 3 to 6 months to get that PMF going, right? But if that repeat-led PMF is not happening, then we just, in some cases, we've reset the clock, saying, look, just not working, so let's go back to the first principles.
As a fashion founder, what is that one metric that I must track?
Maybe I'll pick 2. I think the first would be your trend spotting and design hit rate, right? If you're not able to spot trend and if you're a good part of your designs are not firing, then you would never succeed as a fashion brand. The second would be the repeat metrics and the retention metrics, along with, let's say, the inventory health. That's a proxy for, how quickly. It's actually a proxy for both metrics. If the design hit rate is good, and you're getting a lot of fast sell through because of repeat, and structurally you will be a tight inventory cycle fashion brand.
Got it.
And that's a holy grail of fashion brands globally and in India, right? If you can get that right, you would succeed. If you don't get that right, any amount of consumer love,
It's a leaking bucket then.
it's a leaky bucket.
Yeah. How does AI feature into tomorrow's way of working and across the brands that you are building today?
So we look at it from three angles. In fact, we are rapidly experimenting with a lot of Gen AI across our fashion value chain. I think the first bucket would be just being able to augment the existing capacity with a lot more capacity, but superhuman capability, right? I think that's just automation at scale using agentic AI. The second, I would say, is more autonomous agents, which are truly bringing in intelligence into the decisions we take, whether it's pricing calls, marketing spend optimization. You can think of many such examples, but intelligence at the next level with more autonomous, with some human intervention, but largely autonomous intelligence. And the third is, I think, just reimagining shopping experience itself. I think the next gen commerce experiences which AI can enable at every bit of the consumer's interactions with you, right? All the way to customer support, but customer support is obvious. But the more important piece is how's your shopping journey being enabled, whether it's on D2C, whether it's in a store, right? And at every bit of that consumer interaction, agentic AI is starting to play a role, and hyper personalization at scale, right?
Great.
And that's been a word that's been used for many, many years. But I think the power of AI or Gen AI could actually make it far more real.
Yeah. Again, on the consumer front, how do you see Indian consumers evolving in their fashion trends and choices in the next 3 years?
So I would say first part is, I think democratizing global fashion is happening much faster, and even at price value equations where it becomes a compelling value prop for the consumers. It's no longer the case where I would have to go outside India to get the best of global fashion. So one part of the trend will be driven by global fashion, global pop culture, global fandom, and those themes literally coming to India without almost any lag, right? The second is increasingly we'll also have a lot of fashion which has a lot of regional and national nuances, right? It's no longer that the best of global fashion is the only way Indian pop culture or Indian fashion, including ethnic and fusion, sort of blending into fusion. There are many such trends which can, even in the, let's say, the official merch, would you only go by global fandom themes or anime or Korean K-fashion, those kind of things, or is there a local flavor to that, right? So all of that will also be a larger share of fashion over the next 3 years. Whereas today, I would say 70% or 80% would still be driven by global fashion trends outside of ethnic, of course, coming to India, and that driving the early trendsetters and the immediate trend followers.
Right.
But there'll be a sizable share of Indian regional local flavor, including the many Indias, right? It's not one country. So from Kerala, where you come from, to Andhra, Telangana, where I come from, every part of India has its own.
I mean, you mentioned Korean fashion, and you also said, I think global coming inwards to India has been there.
Right.
But what's interesting is the counter, right?
That's
like you said, I know that Nikhil Kamath has that Bangalore boy, on the Bangalore boy only, right?
Correct,
on his
Bangalore
t-shirt,
boy, yeah.
right? So it's an incredible, like a local fandom thing that comes in. I know that there'll be a Ranchi fandom that comes in as much as a K-pop fandom that comes in, right? So that countering is very interesting.
Absolutely.
Where will it balance out, do you think?
Hard to predict, but I think 60-40, 70-30, but it'll still be 60% global and 40% in India /regional/local, right?
Interesting. Next one is a money-making question. In 2025, if somebody had to build 100 crore fashion brand, what is one hack, one advice that you would give them?
I think I would go back to my previous answer where just pick one small subcategory one channel, focus a lot on product and design and getting supply chain right for that, and do rapid test and learning. Just launch and see what works and what doesn't.
What's one thing you learned at Facebook that you wish every startup would apply?
Maybe I'll contrast that a bit with my consulting background to what I learned at Meta. I think what Facebook taught me was the combination of sharp thinking and sharp execution happening at pace. Like move fast, but both thinking and execution happening with pace, which is very hard to pull off because either it's mindless execution, where even if you do it with pace, you'll get nowhere, or it's a lot of thinking with not sharp execution or fast-paced execution, which again will not get you anywhere because you're just intellectualizing the problem, right? So I think some of us, of course, are more wired to do more thinking, and some of us are more wired to do execution. But doing sharp thinking and sharp execution at really high, crazy velocity, right? I mean, that's really what the Meta culture is all about globally and also in markets like India.
Right.
And that's something that's a brilliant, coming together of two spikes. And if they happen together, it's magic.
If you had to bet your own money today, what are those 3 industries that you feel will create the next set of millionaires and unicorns for India?
I would have thought billionaires, you would say, but yeah. So for me, the number one, I guess, would be applied AI. With all this buzz around Gen AI, I think the foundational models and all of that is moving at breakneck speed. I think the applied AI across industries, across use cases will be the number one. The second, I would say, which is a tougher space, but healthcare, where everything from hardware, software, and AI coming together and solving some real problems that humanity is facing, right? Including solving diseases like cancer and other things, could be the second big one. And if I had to pick a third, I would say for India specifically, I think the next gen manufacturing, while it doesn't feel as new school, including industrial robotics to robotics in general, right? India becoming a large manufacturing hub for the global market. I think there's a massive opportunity.
For founders who are building today, do you have any resources that you can share that's going to help them build further? Podcasts, YouTube video, books, I leave it to you.
Maybe I'll pick a couple of books at different stages. The first one would be 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, which is, of course, first principle thinking around how to start and how to scale. Second one would be Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. As you start to build, you obviously will hit headwinds and you'll face challenges. And that book I've gone back to many times, and every time I reread, I can relate it back to the challenges that I'm facing as a founder and how do I navigate that. So those are the 2 books I would recommend. On the podcast side, I've liked Acquired, which has a fairly wide variety of speakers, but gives you a different worldview. And that's a great learning podcast, I would think.
I think it's a great note to end on. Thank you for being a true testament to the starting from scratch name.
Thanks a lot, Hari. It was good fun for me as well.
That's a pleasure.